Everyone hated Grady. All these decades later, I can still clearly recall when he moved into our quiet little town early one year and into a large house down the road from my own modest home. His parents had left him an enormous inheritance, and he took great pleasure in flaunting his wealth at every opportunity. But we didn't despise Grady because he was well off. We hated him because he was a pestilence that wreaked havoc through our once peaceful community, and there was nothing we could do about it. Grady believed his money meant he could do whatever he wanted without consequence, and he was right. He was a pampered and inept man, far too lazy to do anything for himself, and nowhere near clever, yet highly proficient at ensuring the right people were paid off. When an elderly schoolteacher berated Grady for speeding past the playground and nearly running over a small boy, her house mysteriously burnt down. When a waitress at a local diner rebuked Grady's advances, her father was attacked by two masked men during his regular evening jog and suffered a brain injury. Even the police were in Grady's pocket. On the rare occasion when someone tried to report him, the case always managed to somehow get swept under the rug. Simply avoiding Grady wasn't enough. Sometimes he appeared to select his targets at random. Even innocuous, mundane actions could incur his terrible wrath. By the time hurricane season rolled around, the threat of dangerous weather wasn't the only thing the townsfolk were living in fear of. Then one night, he drunkenly ran over my dog, and I really began to hate him. When news of an impending storm reached us, many opted to evacuate. I chose to stay behind, and so did Grady. I'm not sure why he didn't leave, or make any sort of preparations beyond purchasing a portable generator. I suppose his ego made him feel invincible. The wind whipped through the trees, rain poured down, and the power predictably went out. After it was all over, I drove around to survey the damage. I returned to see Grady, lost without his creature comforts, attempting to set up his new generator. With almost everyone gone or preoccupied with the storm's fallout, it seemed Grady finally had to get his own hands dirty. He obviously had no clue what he was doing. And an idea occurred to me. I made my way to his house. Days passed. Eventually, the police knocked down Grady's door and discovered him dead in his bed, eyes closed in eternal sleep. In the next room sat his generator. The explanation was a tragic accident that happens every hurricane season. Carbon monoxide poisoning. As I watched them carry the body bag out of Grady's house, I thought back to our last conversation. I'd be happy to help you set that up, Grady. But if you run it outside, someone's going to steal it. The safest place to keep it is inside the house. The robbers. The sound of my bedroom door creaking open roused me from my sleep. I drowsily opened my eyes and realized with a jolt of unpleasant surprise that the comforting glow of my nightlight was now extinguished. The house's electricity had gone out. Before I could roll over to face the door and ask my parents what was going on, I heard a voice pierce through the room's darkness.
"It's just some kid,"
a woman whispered.
"He's still asleep. We have the money anyway. Let's go."
I froze. My stomach plummeted and my heart raced. Were I not lying down, the incredible fear surging throughout my petrified body would doubtlessly have sent me collapsing onto the floor. I pressed my lips tighter together, forcing back the scream threatening to burst free from my mouth. "You serious?" The man's voice hissed incredulously. There's 2 dead bodies in the other room. You want to leave a potential witness alive? Silent tears streamed down my face. It took every ounce of my self-control to remain unmoved. If the pair realized that I was awake, I knew they would kill me.
I didn't want that to happen either,
the woman shot back, anger seeping from her hushed tone.
You said no one was going to be home. They were supposed to be on vacation.
So I got my wires crossed. What's done is done. Now, what are we going to do about this? I heard a low, heavy sigh. Sweat droplets trickled down my forehead and landed on my sheets.
Look, the kid hasn't even seen our faces,
the woman stated calmly.
What's he going to tell the police that can be traced back to us?
And you want to risk that, her companion argued. I told you, no loose ends.
He's not a loose end if he didn't see anything.
Listen, you're either in this with me, or they're going to find 4 corpses come morning. There was a long, tense pause. I held my breath, terrified that I would be betrayed by the thundering of my own pounding heart.
You'll make it quick and painless?
The woman asked quietly. Of course. Come on, let me pin him down. Her partner replied sleazily. Murderous footsteps approached my bed. Defenseless, I gripped my blanket tightly and shut my eyes. Suddenly I heard 2 heavy thuds followed by a succession of frightened screams. Somehow I found the courage to look up. I peered over my bed and watched wide-eyed as the pair were dragged beneath it. They clawed at the floorboards and pleaded and wept, but it was no use. Within minutes, they disappeared from my sight forever. Bones snapped and something wet spilled onto the floor. Then the room fell silent. I've been sitting in the darkness ever since, praying for the sun to rise before the sound of unsatiated growling returns. I love my parents, but they were wrong. There is a monster under my bed. The 5-Finger Game. I never told anyone the entire truth about what happened the night I was abducted. But I'm an old man now, and I've grown impossibly weary of living with this hideous secret. I'm finally ready to confess. My memory of that night remains painfully sharp, even after all these years. I remember the leaves crunching beneath my panicked feet as I fled from a wild-eyed man, the terrified cry that tore from my lips as he seized hold of my coat, and the burst of primal fear I felt seconds before the blow to my skull plummeted me into unconsciousness. I awoke in a dark room that reeked of rust. Clothesline rope bound my wrists and ankles. I tried to yell for help and found my voice smothered by a scarf fastened tightly around my mouth. Across from me sat my captor, a knife clutched in his gloved hand. "Have you ever played the 5-Finger Game?" he asked conversationally. Before I could respond, he brought the knife down onto my left hand. The putrid room spun as I soaked the scarf with bile, and my helpless muffled screams whilst he sawed off my fingers one by one. When his gruesome work was completed, he gathered my severed digits and cradled them in the palm of his outstretched hand. "Put your 5 fingers in your mouth," he commanded with a frightening smile as he untied my wrists and loosened the scarf. "Do it and I'll let you go." I stared at him in horror. Agony pulsated through my mutilated hand. The man pressed his knife against my neck. "Well, I can just kill you this very instant. And don't bother screaming. No one's around to hear you." I weakly brought a severed finger to my mouth, shuddering with excruciating revulsion when its fingertip brushed across my lips. The unnatural taste of my own flesh, blood, and bone danced on my tongue as I fought back the nausea rising in my throat. The second was no easier than the first. The third and fourth were equally vile. Finally, I shoved my carved-off thumb into my mouth alongside its 4 horrid companions. The man clapped as tears streamed down my bulging cheeks.
Bravo!
He exclaimed with appreciation.
I'm impressed.
Here's the part that I've always withheld. My shocking admission. It isn't the memory of that grotesque taste that keeps me lying awake at night. It isn't my recollection of that terrible grin on that loathsome man's face, or the chilling sound of his cruel, ghastly laughter. It isn't the fact that he was never caught, or the unshakable thought that he might have forced someone else to play this five-finger game. Do you know what really haunts me? It's the final words he spoke before untying my feet and disappearing into the night. "Hey, kid." He giggled as he pointed at my unharmed right hand. "I never said they had to be your left fingers."